To the course Let's Excel Together. We'll be going through the needed things for you to get abreast with Microsoft Excel from zero base level up until you get to an intermediate point. So jumping right into it, what is Microsoft Excel? Excel is a spreadsheet application. There are several spreadsheet applications, but they all serve a core purpose, which is to store and organize data in a tabular form. All right, to store and organize data in a tabular form. Tables are something that are quite familiar to you, you know. However, there are some important things to understand, to build as the base block basis for you to progress with the Microsoft Excel application. One of such common things that is important to understand, the three words: rows, columns, and cells. I'll tell you again: rows, columns, and cells. What are rows? What are columns? What is a cell? Okay, so a row represents a horizontal point or a horizontal line in the spreadsheet application. Typically, if you can see on the screen, these horizontal lines, as I select them, and they are labeled, you know, by default in the Excel application, they are labeled numerically. These represent rows. While columns are the vertical points, those vertical areas, and they are equally labeled but with alphabets by default. This is the default labeling of rows and columns, right? So the rows represents the horizontal axis, while the columns represents the vertical points, all right, the vertical lines, and the columns are labeled with alphabets while the rows are labeled with numbers. Which brings us to the next one: cell. What is a cell in Microsoft Excel? A cell is the point where a row and a column meet. You could call it the intersection between a row and a column. So typically, um, this is not a default view, but in the default view, you would see that the spreadsheet application presents itself in grids. These little rectangles, they are the cells. And if you look critically at the rectangle, you see that this column here, that's column G. This is the point where column G and row 7 intersect. So this cell is referred to as cell G7. If you played checkers or chess, you would see that you would recall that some of these points have labels. Where you say move the crown to G4, E5. You could just apply that logic here. It's fine if you're not familiar with these games. Same thing still applies from what we've learned. We've learned that the columns are the vertical lines, column G, and the rows are the horizontal lines. In this case here, row 7. Okay, so the point where this my cursor is right now is what column G and row 5. So if we were to refer to this, you would say this is cell G5. Just to try yourself, what cell is my cursor currently on now? If your answer is K2, it's correct. If it isn't, don't beat yourself up. Try again with where my cursor currently is. If your answer isn't E4, perhaps you should just try to refer to what I said about the column. A column is the vertical axis straight down from up downwards or downwards upwards, your preference. And then the row moves from right to left or left to right. Okay. The cell is where this column and this row they intersect. You could call it a cross. Okay, so we reference cells based on that meeting point between the row and the column, with the column coming first. So by default, you now call this cell E4. This is cell C3. Okay, and having said that, of course, your application is open and you're seeing different things on your screens. Now, there are some common terms that are used interchangeably. Some persons call them differently, but they mean the same thing. Now, it's important to understand what the other party is saying so you don't get mixed up or you don't get confused along the lines. Okay. Now, to start with, we have these items at the top of the screen here. You have file, home, insert. These are menus or tabs, right? So you have the file tab, home tab, insert, page layout, and it goes all the way down to your right. However, in this introductory bit of the course, we're going to be looking at the home tab. The file menu basically is where you use to access existing files in your local machine, or if you're connected to a cloud base, you could also access files in that cloud repository. You could also create a new file from the file menu. There are some keyboard shortcuts that could help you fast track certain activities that we'll cover much later as we progress in the course. But for the home tab here now, we have different groupings, right? Different groupings of menu items. Some persons call them ribbons. So here we have the clipboard. So the things here are things that concern the clipboard. The clipboard basically is just like an artist, when an artist is done with with a drawing, and they're trying to paint, they have something on their canvas there. They have different things, on their clipboard, so they just apply their paintbrush and do that. So it's kind of like a clipboard, but in digital terms here, there are things that are on this clipboard that you would also get to understand as we progress in the course. Um, of course, this module, we're going to focus on data entry, how to enter data. Remember, the spreadsheet application is to store and organize data in a tabular form. So we're going to be focusing on how to store the data. To store the data, it has to be provided. It has to be entered by one person or provided by another party. So here we'll be looking at how to enter this data. And key things on how to enter the data typically is to type it. If it's not, if you didn't import it from another source, you have to key it in yourself. That's basically typing it yourself. So we're going to do a little bit of typing at this point. One of the first things I'd like us to have is, for order in our form, we would have a serial number column. So we're just going to give this an acronym SNO, and then we'll move to the next cell, which is the next column, column B. I will give this a title of name. Okay, give the title of name. From the name, we're going to indicate the course. All right, the course. Um, Hearing from the course, we're going to put duration. Duration. We're going to impute cost as a title, and lastly, we're going to put country. We're going to put country. Okay. Now, having done this, let's impute some values. So I'll start with myself. I'm number one on my list. You number one on your list. I'd say number one. My name is Belema Grant. Okay. And this course, now, I can't click on the next bit, so I'm just going to use my arrow button to move to the next cell, which is in column C. And so the course is Let's Excel Together, or you could call it Excel Intermediate Course. Your preference. I'm just going to type that in there. And the duration, what's your expected duration for completing this course? You impute that in there. For me, I'm going to give it an hour. Okay, I'm going to give it an hour. But so I'm going to say 1 hour. We'll come back to this later. The cost. How much is it going to cost you for being on this part? Based on your duration, you put an estimate there. So I'm just going to say 100. And the country, currently in Nigeria, I'm just going to impute Nigeria. I hit enter, or I click back to the cell beneath, serial number one, so I can make an additional entry into that point there. So here I'm going to put in the next person, which is serial number two, and I'm going to say Boma Grant. Now, for the course, Boma Grant is also going to be taking the course Let's Excel Together. Rather than type it in, I have options. I could copy this and paste it in here. Okay, so here now under the clipboard, I have this option here of copy. So I'll click on copy. That's to copy this. Click on copy. I come to the area where I want to paste it in, and then I'm going to just paste it in there. So you see that what I had there is now in here. Now, just to explain a little bit of what this entails is to copy. You're mimicking what is already existing, and to paste it in is you're putting it into that particular space or position. Now you could copy, could mimic, or you could cut to extract, to take it out completely. And that's what this icon above here represents, to cut. So if I do this and I come in here and I say paste, you see that it's gone from its initial point. Okay. Now I just did Control Z, which is an undo command in the Excel application. Okay. Moving over to the duration here, I'm going to give 3 hours. You know, I'm going to assign 3 hours to Boma, and I'm going to say 300. For the value. I'm going to send Boma to Brazil. Okay. So now let's pause here and also look at something while we're using the copy feature. There are two things I would like to point out. While you're taking this course, whatever module or feature you see in the application, if you hover your cursor is starting your mouse, even if you're using your finger or your trackpad, and just place it above any module on the application tries to give you a brief description of what is expected of that model. So here you can see that my mouse is over the paste area, and you're saying paste, and it also gives you a keyboard shortcut, to add content on the clipboard to your document, copy, to put a copy of the selection, just like I had shared earlier, and you've seen it, in practice. Now, another thing to also point out is wherever you see a pointy arrow down, like this or like this in the Excel application, it means that there are more things that are visible at that point that you could click to explore. You could click to explore to see how you can perform a variety of actions. So sometimes don't be afraid to take on activities like this to see what you can do. So that's for this clipboard area. I would like to move to the font area, alignment, and numbers briefly. Now, for the font area, font types. Font types typically represent like our different handwritings. Okay, the different handwritings that we have. My writing is probably different from yours. Like I have this piece of paper here, and if I were to write my name, like I did type out, you know, you would see that it's not as nice or simple as it's looking out here. And that's what font types basically offer. Like a different writing. So if I click on the drop down, like I said, to you to see different things that are available, I get to see different available font types that I could use. Okay, I'm just going to select one. I'm just going to select one for you to see how different it is to this. So now you see that Bomagrind, the font type used for Bomagrind, agency FB, you see that already visually is different, from the entry above it for Bedemagrind. So that's what the font type helps to do, just like you're changing your handwritings. Um, in terms of the rule of thumbs on which font type to adopt, something that we're going to cover as we progress, in the final bit of this course for presentations. There are some font types that are recommended based on the perceived audience of the document you're preparing. Okay, so we'll touch on that as we progress. For now, let's just get grounded on the basics. Okay, so I'm going to undo add font type to set it to the default Calibri font. Next to it, you have font size. Okay, so you could enter a default font size. Remember, I said you could click on the drop down whenever you see that arrow there for you to select different font sizes. Okay, and here you could automatically increment by a step or decrement your font size by a step. Below, you have the B for bold to make your text bold, I to italicize your text, you have U to underline. There's a drop down there. I would like for you to touch on that drop down a little for yourself to see what you can do with it. I'm going to skip more on this, and alignment, so we can talk more about it when we have data populated, when we're discussing formatting. But I would also equally like to just talk a bit on this bit here that has to do with the numbers. Now, I want you to pay close attention to this bit here where you have general. Okay, when I'm going to make my next entry. So I'm going to say 3. I'm going to put in another name. I'm going to say David, David John, you know, for a name. And for the course, I'm just going to use driving. Okay, let's use a different course and let's say 1 hour. Okay, and the cost I'm going to set it to 500. The country, I'm going to set the country to Ireland. Okay, now did you observe any changes here? None. It was all on general, 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 because this represents the number format. The format is kind of like the data type of what you're imputing into the spreadsheet application. And by default, Excel interprets everything as general, or it tries to interpret everything as general unless you specify otherwise. There are varieties of data types. If you want to specify, you could select from the drop down to see various data types that you could let the application know that, oh, I want you to interpret this not as general. General says no specific format specified, so the application is at liberty to interpret it how it best fits. Okay, but if you want the application to interpret it clearly how you want to specify, if you're imputing like a number, you want to see it as a number, a currency, an accounting entry, if it's a date, or an entry regarding time, you can specify that. If it's a percentage, a fraction, the scientific, those kind of entries, you could also specify. The text, the text bit now, I'm going to just mention this briefly here. As we progress, you would understand a bit more regarding the text bit. When you specify that you want an entry to be treated as a text, a literal text, what you're basically telling the application is that you don't want you don't want it to be manipulated, especially in terms of calculations, because with the Excel application you can do several manipulations, like arithmetic manipulations. But when you specify that this is a literal text, it should be that. So even if there's an entry of a number, you can't perform an arithmetic function on it, say to add it to another number. It may appear as a number there, but then the application is not going to treat it as one. Okay, so that's regarding the data types. All right, regarding the data types. Um, the next thing I would also like to touch on is regarding the serial numbers. Now, assuming you have to make entries for 30 persons, or let's say 11 to 19 persons from this list here, we have 3. I'm imagining you also have 3 on your system there. You could have the numbers, you're typing in the numbers and all, but the serial numbering, it really has to flow in that ascending order. So it's incrementing as it's going down. It is going down. So the next person is supposed to be serial number 4, right? 5, 6, as you have entries, it should. Now, Excel has a feature that can allow you to automatically fill cells based on an observed pattern. So we have two approaches to this, right? Basically, it's called the fill command, right? The fill command. So you have autofill. So I'm just going to spell it out here. Autofill, and you also have flash fill. Okay, autofill and flash fill. So the autofill, how does the autofill work? See, from my experience, I normally use the autofill with numberings like this, serial numberings like this. So let's assume that I have a list that's already sent to me, probably by a vendor, a client, colleague at work, but I want to have numbers to these items. So what I'm going to do here now is, from what we've learned, I'm going to copy these entries here, and I'm going to duplicate them by pasting, you know, I'm going to paste again, just so that they can be merged. Now, I know they are duplicated, but however, if we wanted to reference, oh, I want David, say we have multiple Davids, which of the David are you referring to? I want David at number 7, David at number 6. That's where it will be very important to say, oh, can you just, from the list you have, what's the person's number on that list? What's the serial number on that list? So it's important. It's one of the reasons why it's good to have ordering to your data sets. Okay. So here now, rather than come to be typing 4, 5, going down, I could just simply highlight this range of 1, 2, 3, and you see that at the bottom of the cell, there's like a tick point, that is green, and if I move my cursor to that point there, you see my cursor has changed its appearance. It's not it's not how it used to be here. You're saying it's just a tick cross. Okay, when I highlight this and I move it to the end there, you're saying that it's not as thick as that, and that one was even whitish, but this is black. Okay, now this is to enable the autofill command. I could drag this manually. If I drag this and I release it at this point, you see that it completes the numbering to the point where I released it. Okay, and it's incrementing. However, that similar kind of action, but instead of dragging, saying that my cursor has changed its appearance to this, I'm going to double click, and voila. What happens is that it fills the cells below to the point where the cell to its right, if it was at its left, is empty. So it moves to the next non-empty cell, and increments based on what was before it. So that's what this autofill, I'm just going to italicize it, and even underline it from what you've seen so far. That's what this autofill helps you achieve. Okay, try it. All right, try it. To just take a few seconds. I'm gonna just give a few seconds to just try it, to just see if you can replicate similar action, and where you're having challenges, just drop it in the comment section, chat box. Let's walk that over. Okay, so let's move to the flash fill. The flash fill, rather than just based on like incremental or replicating, the autofill can be used for several other purposes, but for the purpose of this lecture, we're going to just limit it to this. Now, the flash fill, one very good way of using the flash fill is what I want to expand on here now. So if we look at our name column, we'll see that it's a combination of the first name and the last name. What if we wanted just the first name? Okay. What if we wanted just the first name from this list, rather than just Belema Graham? We want just Belema, we want just Boma, we want just David. Okay. Now we can use the flash fill for that purpose. So I'll type in Belema. I'm going to type in Boma, right? And when I hit enter, the Excel application is already trying to read what I'm trying to do. Suggest. You saw at the point when I was typing Boma, it was making a suggestion. It was a bit faded, grayed out, as to make entries. Now, if I should hit the keyboard shortcut on my keyboard, Control and E, if you're on a Mac, that would be CMD plus E. You'd see that it fills that based on the entries that were here before. Okay, so try that out on your system, and let me know where you have any challenges, so we can just quickly iron that out. Thanks again for tuning in, for watching on this model data entry. Please ensure that you follow through with the next model for data formatting. Thanks. See you soon.